Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Deconversion Stories. And Ellie, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there with the music.
No problem.
Today, I'm speaking with Ellie Davis. As you can see, she is here with us. We're trying to figure out the whole technology thing, so we figured it out, and that's why we're a couple minutes late. But we're here. And today, we're going to hear Ellie's deconversion story, and you never know what else. You know how these things go, you guys. We always side off into something here and there, so you never know what's going to happen. But anyways, Ellie, what I usually do is, as I just said, I talk to people about how they found their way out of whatever belief system they're a part of, kind of give us the ups and downs, and kind of when you started noticing the dominoes falling, and wow, this is I can't believe this anymore, kind of thing, and take us on that journey.
Yeah. So as I was really thinking about what I wanted to kind of share in terms of my deconversion story, it was really hard to find a starting point, because I think the starting point happened when I was 3 years old, and that's quite a lot of time to have a deconversion process, because it was also essentially the time I was converting. So rather than going into all that mess, I'll focus on specific topics and specific moments and skip a whole bunch in between. So when I was approximately 3 to 5, I had a lot of very, very more real than real, vivid, lucid dreams that were referencing things that I felt like I knew about God and about like the spiritual realm and all of these things, which I didn't have words for, of course, because I was 3. But that's kind of how it felt like to me, in the context I was given in the family I was raised, which at the time was an evangelical, Bible-believing, born-again Christian family.
Oh, boy.
Oh, yes. So, because that was the background, the thing I attributed the lucid dreaming to was spiritual experiences with a literal, or at least spiritually real, actual existing God, who I, of course, assumed was Jesus, because that's what the most logical possible, that was the only explanation that I even had to go off of at that point in time. But I was convinced that I flew around the world and visited places and met people and did like magic healing tricks, basically, for people around the world.
You did this.
Right. Well, God did this through me, is the language I, of course, would have learned to use. So anyway, at one point, I told this to my mom, and she didn't believe me. Who would have thunk? That, she didn't believe that I'd gone halfway around the world and had experiences. And she asked me specific questions like, do you remember specific faces? Do you remember specific locations? Can we find anything about any of these? Because these are big events. They'd be in the news, right? And so she had me go through this process of identifying, no, there's no evidence for me to believe that any of these things actually comported to reality that we all share. And so it took me a while, but ultimately I came to accept the likelihood, extreme likelihood, that it was in my head, that it was a human experience, that it may have been an spiritual experience, but it wasn't an experience that was actually in the real world. No matter how real it felt, it couldn't have been actually in the real material world, because, or at least if it was, I didn't have enough reason to think that there was a good likelihood that it did. And so that was the first big step. And the reason I consider that such a big step is because later on, when I went back to think about other spiritual experiences I went through that same process. Is it something that is very factual? Are there other possible explanations for this? No matter how attached to this I am, is it sufficient for me to actually conclude that this was happening, or is this the story I was telling myself in my head?
Right.
So with that as a starting place.
So you were thinking all this stuff, though, when you were 3?
Well, these are things that I started experiencing when I was 3. And then as I grew up, kind of rationalized, and as I grew, came into those conclusions. So.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of that's retroactively stuff that I kind of, how I responded later once I could think better. But
okay, fair enough. Carry on. Yeah. Sorry.
I probably came to terms when I was about 7 that it was likely not actually true, even though I kind of had to, I was basically forced to accept the possibility where that I was dismissed by the people around me. So I just couldn't, you know, when you're a kid and your parents know everything, you have to question yourself instead of them in those circumstances. So
Sure,
anyway,
absolutely, sure. You would think, but I discovered at an early age that something that one of my parents told me wasn't quite true. So
yeah,
that's when the whole
that
doubt
one
thing
took
kicked
me.
in.
That was the thing I was dumbest about for the longest time compared to other things. But yeah,
Well, you don't really realize it though when you're a kid. It kind of dawns on you as you get a little older. So
yeah. Yep. Well, my parents didn't even tell my brother and I that Santa Claus was real. So they kind of gave this established foundation that we are going to tell you what we believe is true, what, the things we are convinced of all the time. We're not going to intentionally trick you about anything.
right.
And so that might have been part of figuring it out a little later too. But yeah, did you have any other questions before I kind of hop into the next piece?
No, carry on. Carry on.
Cool.
Yeah.
So from there, I was actually homeschooled for about half of my elementary school education. And this included things like Answers in Genesis. And
boy.
oh gosh, I wrote down the name of the dude that has an organization. What's his name? Bob Cornkey of the Bible Archaeology Search and Exploration Institute. His discoveries.
Oh, sure.
Things like Christian nationalism. Things like the founding fathers were Christian and America was a Christian nation. All these things were in my elementary school curriculum.
Wow.
And they confirmed that not only was what I experienced, even though it felt real, not probably real. It reinforced that Christianity was actually comporting to reality as better or best compared to anything else.
Sure, okay.
Yeah, well, as a child, I didn't do my own research. I was given history books and curriculum that my parents found reliable, that they explained how they came across that information and how they vetted it, which was, I learned later on, my friend recommended it to me. My pastor likes this. It agrees with what I think. It has this big name by it that has the word doctor. There's an authority behind it, essentially, was the reason. But of course, I wasn't going to figure that out as an elementary school student. So that was the second big piece of the deconversion, is once I started really looking into those things, the things that had kind of propped up my confidence that Christianity comported to the world better compared to any other religion, pretty much I just had to throw them all in the trash. There wasn't enough, certainly without way more research than I was doing. There wasn't. And a lot of the things that I remember most specifically that were most directly reinforcing are very obviously not good evidence as I look back. So
give us an example of something that you mean like that.
So since I pulled it up, Bob Cornkey is the guy. He is not actually an archaeologist, it turns out, but he has an institute where they essentially search for biblical things, but for archaeological evidence of those. And so he's come forward throughout the years with multiple different discoveries, which have then been followed up by the archaeological community dismissed for various reasons. But a lot of his discoveries were things that I thought were actually real at the time, 20 years ago, possibly before they'd been debunked. I don't know, because again, I wasn't good at researching. But going back and seeing those things, yeah, no one's ever found Noah's Ark, even though I was taught. There might have been a chariot wheel in a river around Egypt, but that's really expected considering how much of Egyptian history is there.
Supposed to be the
Things
Dead
like
Sea.
that.
They found that, but unfortunately, they a couple of Israeli students figured it was when they took it out and figured it out, it was much too early or too late to be anywhere near when the Exodus would have happened. Yeah,
and then there's a couple of like land bridges under the water, but at the same time, we're pattern-seeking creatures. I'm sure there are many lesser. I mean, there are fords and rivers. There are places that are less deep that go across from one side to the other in a body of water.
Sure
It's
do.
a very
Yep.
normal thing. So just think of that was another big part of it. So
Well, seeing as how there's literally no evidence that the Exodus even happened, the
right,
chances are it didn't happen. So
right, exactly. There's lots of well-documented history that does not include even anything, and it seems like there are people that believe that, in fact, the pyramids were not even built by slaves to begin with. So there's a lot of just lore that's been either debunked or the evidence is so underwhelming, there's no reason to believe that it happened. However, I was given those one or two exceptions to rules that looked kind of interesting and told, yep, this happened. So there's that. But yeah, from there, go ahead.
Oh, don't carry on.
Sure. So from there, I went to public school, and that was a very good thing because, first of all, I learned that, there are things called social skills that extend beyond my immediate family, and that was helpful.
Yep.
But in addition, just being able to be exposed to people who were secular was a really big thing. In fact, the reason why I decided I wanted to go to public school was because I was taught from, my churches and from family growing up that as Christians, our purpose in life was the Great Commission, in that we were supposed to go and essentially bring the goodness and love and positive things that God brought into our lives and share that with others.
Like slavery and rape and yeah.
Well, of course, I didn't know it. I didn't attribute
Of
anything
course.
of things at the time, of course.
They
But
don't talk about that stuff.
well, and here's the weirdest part is I was told about a lot of it, and then it was rationalized for me. And so from my perspective, everything there was a rational explanation, a sufficient explanation for all of those things, and God could still be the good guy. Now, of course, I had no foundation in logic and reasoning for any of this.
Fair.
But, yeah, so there's that. But yeah, it was really great to just begin to see, other people have different experiences with these things and come from different perspectives. And that was very good because I was able to have experiences where people shared things with me that were similar to the things I'd experienced. People were able to experience that kind of love outside of Christianity. Now, I attributed it to, maybe it's not quite the same kind of love, was something that I was taught, because you can't have true love without Jesus.
Right.
I cringe now. I'm but in interacting with people, I was able to see how, even if I didn't believe the essence of it was the same, their experience of it was so insufferably similar that it made it really uncomfortable to try to do anything evangelistic. Because it felt like I was bringing in something completely out of the blue that wasn't related to the circumstance for no good reason. And even if there was, so in a way, it put me into the state where I was looking for opportunities and where I constantly felt like I wasn't living up to the purpose in my life.
Right.
And so I got depressed.
I bet.
Who would imagine why that would happen? I couldn't. I genuinely couldn't figure it out. But around that time, my family actually switched churches. Rather than starting in about middle school, my mom started exploring charismatic circles. So not only are we talking,
whoa.
Yeah.
What the hell is a charismatic circle?
So if you think of, it's basically the cult version of Christianity. Small house churches, large, Bethel, I think, is a good example of it with Jesus culture. If you're familiar with them, where they believe in things like prophecy, speaking in tongues as being an actual thing, the healing, words of knowledge. And at the particular church that my parents ended up going to by the time I was in high school, they actually took a lot of Western perspective about what Eastern perspective is about the Bible and some New Age mystical ideas and brought them all into kind of to inform the sermons. So it was very, very, very niche.
When you
I don't know if it exists anywhere else kind of Christianity.
when you say New Age, what do you mean by bringing in New
That's
Age?
what my pastor read a couple New Age books, and so he
Oh,
called
okay.
it New Age and used that as some of the basis for some of the ideas and how he interpreted scripture.
Are we talking like crystals, that kind of thing, or?
Um, I honestly don't know because I didn't read the books. I just kind
Okay.
of took what I liked from it and most of it I didn't feel like I really understood a lot of it anyway. So
Right.
I don't make claims to have any knowledge about actual New Age
Okay.
anything. So
Fair enough.
it's just what I was
Sure,
told
sure.
to call it.
So the New Age stuff I'm familiar with is like the crystals and the triangle pyramid healing and all that crap, right? So
It
tarot
was a lot of
cards and
stuff about
astrology.
there's a lot of word salad that happens involved
Yeah.
with drawing imagery and symbolism from scriptural stories and equating words because they're similar in the original language, and this is associated with this and this is associated with this, therefore something different. A lot of that going on, but some of it was helpful to
Sounds like they're
me in
just
that time.
making shit up as they go, to be honest.
Basically, I mean, they're making stuff up, being very convinced of it, talking about people. It's kind of like when you get excited about something and you're
Hmm.
like, this is really cool. What if? And then you start seeing that confirmation bias circle happen. And everybody in my circle, of course, was incredibly attached to confirmation bias because when 3 or 4 people in the room have a similar thought that goes together, that can piece together, that's God. That's God confirming that what we're hearing from him is correct. And that's the
Right.
only way prophecy and word of knowledge works. It's do I have the same idea as you? Yes. Do I have that same, impression when this thing happens, or this imagery is what I get and I take it this way and now this brought this to my we spent hours on this every Sunday. This was the
Oh
church that
boy.
I went to. Yeah, it was fun. And
Oh
now
boy.
going back, I would be extremely uncomfortable, but it was
Yeah.
fun at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That wouldn't
So
surprise me at all.
yeah. So
I'd
it's
be
almost like
throwing
an
shit at
improv
people like,
circle.
shut up, shut up.
It reminds me of an improv circle from drama class in high school, is
Mhm.
what it reminds me of now. But in any case, going there, I was able to hear some different kinds of opinions about the same scripture that I started out learning from a very literal biblical sense.
Right.
And so that experience did a couple things. It helped me take the Bible from this like high horse, literal, everything is exactly true. My interpretation is correct. Others, maybe they have, like, I'm sure my perspective is wrong, but I don't really see it and I don't really believe that. But they're definitely wrong in these specific ways. It took me out of that to more of a what is the experience that we're having based off of these stories?
Hmm.
And taking some things like, as I hear, there's no actual literal Adam and Eve, and taking some of these things that came up in science class and some of these things, and it allowed me to kind of loosen my grip a little bit on the truth claims, to go
Hmm.
from it's definitely true to it's true, but is it true experientially? Is it true metaphorically? Is it true literally? And to have all of these options on my plate for how it can be true. And so that was a good first step towards not being so close-minded. Um,
I mean, let's face it. Something is either true or it isn't.
correct.
With experientially, literally, metaphor, drop all that fucking baggage. It's something is either true or it is not. There
Right.
is no,
And I
there's
didn't
no
get there for a while,
kind
but
of
I
truth.
got there, so
Okay, good,
don't worry
good.
about that too much. Yeah. Now it's for me, I'm more considerate of there are truths about the human experience, and there are things that we experience that are true and are not true.
Yeah,
And there are things that we experience that are not true that are bad, and there are things we experience that are not
sure.
true that we can interpret as good. It doesn't have to do with the truth at this point. It's more about, is it healthy for our psychology? And that's a question we can have actual conversations about. However, um, it began to help me put things into that category of this is a human experience instead of into the category of like factual truth claims. And so it was kind of the first step on that slider towards these are things that happen in people's heads, and they can be very, very impactful, and they can have, huge ramifications for people's lives and actions and thoughts and all sorts of things. But that doesn't mean that they're true because they have those things. It means that we need to care about them, but that's about it. Yeah.
We got to remember that old saying. There's another old saying: your beliefs inform your actions, and your actions have consequences.
Yeah, exactly. However, I was being told things like, if you believe hard enough, that wallet which you lost will be magically moved. God can magically have an angel put that wallet in a place where you'll find it. Things like that is where I was very far down the woo train. But that was better compared to feeling guilty that I wasn't able to fulfill my life purpose. And yet was trying really hard. It was able to kind of get me out of that loop and into more of a loop of it's actually God's responsibility to do his work of converting people. And I might happen to be involved, but it's not something that I have to bend over 3 times and do a dance. And, if I don't, then I have to be like into like sad or anything. And so it was really good in that way at the time. It would have been great if I had a more direct path, I feel like now, but I got what I could from the crumbs I could from the places I had access to. So anyway, from there, I had a couple experiences that I really remember strongly to this day, and there were a couple, in between of stories. But the first one was an acquaintance at school who, if I'm remembering correctly, she was Catholic and she was being forced to go through the confirmation by her parents at the time because they were scared for her soul. No, she didn't. She said she didn't believe anything. She felt like believe in it. She felt like it would be dishonest, like kind of lying and making her be a liar if she went through this ceremony that she didn't believe in, making a promise to God that she didn't sincerely make. And that was kind of the first time I actually acknowledged that religion itself, Christianity itself, actual Christian concepts that I believed were true could have an actual harm on people, as opposed to thinking that these things that I thought were true and good couldn't. They were all good. There wasn't any way for them to be harmful, and it was something else that was causing that harm. And so I remember that because that was a big deal to me at the time. I didn't know what to do with that.
Right.
And the second thing that was really big was I actually had a conversation at community college a few years after that. I met her in high school, where someone basically asked me, well, you have this experience, they have this experience, they all say it's God and they say it's different gods. How do you
It's a good one.
Rationalize this?
Right.
And what I came to at the time was, I don't care whether it's called Jesus or Allah or Buddha or love. What I care about is what that is. What are they experiencing that they're labeling that? Whatever that is. At the time, I thought that this, experience was kind of a fact of the universe that you had associated with some kind of spirit. So because I had this association, I felt like it doesn't matter what they call it. If it's the same thing, it's the same thing.
Right.
Now I know that people have different experiences based off different stimuli due to psychology, but that wasn't a factor at the time. So at the moment, that brought me further away from this like strict, narrow definition of God to a more broad, what are people actually experiencing? What is actually good for people? What is actually healthy? What are the kinds of things that we need to be working towards to increase in the world, as opposed to dogmatically going after the label of Jesus. Mm-hmm. And at the time I thought, of course, that Jesus was the right label, but that got thrown away later. At the same time, I'd rather they have the wrong label and the right experience than the right label and not actually be experiencing the real thing, whatever that meant.
Yeah. I know what you mean by that.
Yeah.
I'm
And
pretty
so that
sure.
kind of sets the stage.
Oh, is this when it all started to crumble?
Yes. So when it started to, I'm actually feel extremely, extremely fortunate because I honestly just extremely lucky because the rest of how this goes is just a testament to how fortunate I am that the particular people that decided to raise me focused on certain aspects
Mhm.
of the faith, and people that I'm in relationship with now. I'm very lucky to have them in my life, and all of that just kind of makes me feel like super lucky. And anyway, but from there, I actually went to college for a while, and some of the leaders in the Christian organization I went to, Crew, brought me that next step. They basically said, "You seem to be spending a lot of your time trying really hard, but do you have anyone that you'd want to at your wedding if you had one?" And I went, "No." And they went, sit back, throw out the evangelism, just have relationships with people. And I went, holy crap, that is what I want.
So
Sorry.
you had no want to continue with the religion at that point?
I did, but it was kind of the first step of secularization for me. Because
Okay.
instead of being like super attached to like the religious side of the mission purpose of my life, I kind of take a step back, was able to kind of release that and go, okay, what do I want to do? Who do I want to be friends with? How do I want to kind of engage in the world? And that was super
Okay.
meaningful because, like, gosh, I had never done that before.
You're right there.
Yeah.
Kind of
Anyway.
these are, I'm assuming these are tears of happy memories.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I cry when I'm happy. It's weird.
Well, there's a big virtual hug for you. So
Thanks. So anyway, yeah, I did that, and then I met my husband. Now, at the time, obviously he wasn't, but we all knew that. So, um, anyway, met him, moved to Portland, started learning how to adult, which was hard, but during that
I still
process,
figuring it out myself, so it's okay.
I know, right? I don't know if it's ever going to end, but it's okay. So one thing I decided that I'm really glad for now, and this is kind of the second step in secularization, was I decided that rather than trying to look for a sign from God about who I was going to have as my partner, I wanted to decide myself. And
Mhm.
so that was a very healthy thing as well. And we got married, and then retroactively, I realized all of these signs. I was super happy because there are lots of coincidences that happen every day, cool
Oh yeah,
things that we associate. And so I was able to, and so I made those. Um, and
sure.
he made those too, and we shared them, and it was really sweet and it was fun. Um,
One thing they do. I'm sorry to cut you off there.
no, go for it.
Uh, One thing they do say about coincidence is that you'll hear people say, "Oh, it's like a 1 in a million thing." Yeah, but okay, that's like that happens like 1 in a million times. That might happen to somebody. Sure, maybe,
Mhm.
but how many people are there on the planet? What, like 7 something billion people? So let's do the math here. That's like 7,000 times a day that could happen, right? So it's not really that big a deal.
Right.
Coincidences are just that. They're coincidences.
No, exactly. And at the time, I believe they were signs, but the key to it is I didn't make the decision because I was being obedient or because I felt like it was something that I was supposed to do. I made the decision because that's what I wanted, and then retroactively rationalized a bunch of ways I'm supposed to do it. So,
Right.
anyway, as opposed to the opposite, which is what had been happening before for the most part. Um, well, I mean, I guess it was the same thing, but from my perspective, subjective experience, the order had switched. Anyway.
Exactly.
And then from there, it took about 2-3 years where ultimately I started out with the goal of just wanting to kind of relax into a state of peacefulness and being in touch
Mhm.
with, I think, what I would now call more of my inner self, or
Sure.
conscious, or whatever we would want. Some of those things that you practice in meditation that is more just allowing you to be
Yeah.
in that
Connect
space.
with yourself.
Exactly. And I
Connect to
thought
learn and
that
understand
was
who you
the epitome of prayer and being in the Holy Spirit. And so I started out with, let's start, on that. And then I kind of took away the don't work so hard pieces. And then you don't have to worry about that Great Commission, not in those words, but that's not your job either. And I was able to just kind of start breathing and being in that space. And as opposed to praying intentionally, I just more started being in that space. And by about 3-4 years, maybe into my marriage with my husband, I wasn't praying in any other sense. I hadn't for like at least a couple of years. And if there
Good.
was a super difficult moment when like I felt like I really needed something, I would pray, but it usually just kind of turned into role play in my head because that's kind of how I process things. So,
I do something similar, so I get you.
yeah. So, in any case, my husband came out to me about that time, and he has always been somebody that really thinks through stuff. That was one of the things that I really appreciated about him, and why I was attracted to him was he really thinks about things. He processes
Mhm.
it, he, checks it, he tries to use good methods, and searches for he searches to debunk things as opposed to my family, which seeks to confirm things and listens to
Sure.
authority.
So
And I really like that. So,
I'm assuming your husband's a non-believer as well.
yeah, he's Zach, who you had on a few weeks back.
Okay.
So he
Very
is.
good.
Yes. And so he basically said, yeah, I no longer believe in God. I'm an atheist now. And my first reaction was, okay, wow, why? And so he showed me AE. And after doing the due diligence of, yeah, no, we're not gonna have relationship problems over this. Don't worry about that. But yeah, you showed me AE, atheist experience, and I
Yeah.
started kind of looking at some of the arguments from the other side, and I'd
Sure.
been taught about the arguments from the other side, but I hadn't heard the arguments from the other side. And
Right.
there's a very important distinction there, because
Yes.
one reinterprets it through a lens of agreement and the other does not. Um,
Right. Right.
and that was good. And so I started finding out that actually there are some legitimate questions here that need to be looked at. Like, I was taught that God was all loving, all powerful, and all knowledgeable, and that certainly had some problems. And
The biggest issue with the omnis that I have
yeah,
is if he's all knowing,
yeah,
right away I think so he knows everything that's ever going to happen, everything, which means that he knew ahead of time that Adam and Eve were going to fall in the garden. So the
yep.
whole thing's a setup.
Except that
But
he
he
had
knew what
planned
was
for
going
that,
to
is
happen.
what the Christians would say. He planned for Jesus to die on the cross because that makes him so righteous.
Yeah. He knew he was going to have to send his son down to be killed ahead of time.
Exactly.
So the whole thing's a setup.
Yep. And that completely ignores everything that happens in between that's shitty.
Oh, and there's lots. Trust me,
There's
there's
lots.
lots.
Yeah.
And one of the funniest things I think that I hear from people who still believe is, we don't go by the Old Testament. Yeah, you fucking do. You've got Genesis in your book, and you've got Exodus in your book. That's the Old Testament. Oh well, we don't go by the we just what? Well, it's the same God, right? What did he go from being a dick to being a nice guy all of a sudden? God's unchanging. Remember? It's like yeah. I want
I was,
to hit my head with a
yeah.
hammer half the time.
ultimately ended up kind of splitting it into this really weird cognitive dissonance experience of God has all these different parts to him. And in a way, I kind of wandered from God being all good first before anything else. Because ultimately, if all of these things were part of God, were things that God would do, then we had to either give up on what the label good means, or God had to be good and evil in some respects. And there wasn't really anything in between. He had to have a mean streak. He had to have, and so in a way, it kind of humanized God
Why?
before I even deconverted, because
Right.
it was kind of that was kind of going along with it. Well, it doesn't really matter what you call it; it's more the experience. It was I kind of had a deistic phase of my Christianity around that.
Okay. Like
Because
dropping most of the theism stuff
yeah,
and just God is like everywhere kind of
right. And
thing.
I called it Jesus still, and I still had like the ties mentally to the Bible, but
Mhm.
it was all cognitive dissonance, everything I operated at, everything that I kind of acted upon, everything that I made sense of was all more the theistic. There's a
Okay,
spiritual
fair enough.
world that we all have in common, kind of thing. Um,
All right.
but yeah, I just made less and less sense. And that kind of brings me to my second main point is, in addition to going from these spiritual experiences are definitely things that happen to their experiential things to maybe we have different labels for them and that's okay, to maybe they're all just human experiences that literally happen in our brains and aren't actually spiritual at all.
Right.
So the second major slider to that was going from being really confident to less confident because the things that I perceived as real obviously couldn't comport all the way to the reality all the time, to
Right.
having the world just make less and less and less sense. If I could declare that there should be a wallet in that backpack, there should be a fucking, excuse me, wallet in that
Oh, you can
backpack.
swear. It's okay. You can swear.
There should, and that should happen every time without fail. The problem is that happened one time out of a billion times of me going, I lost my thing. It should be there. No, it's not. So, anyway, at some point, just being able to listen to the arguments from the other side, I was able to kind of have some of these questions as I listened to the arguments and was convinced by things like, yeah, by definition, God cannot be all knowledgeable, all powerful, and all loving, and be and not have just complete split personalities. Like it's
Not just
literally
that.
impossible. Even if they're
Not
split
just that.
personalities at that point, you still couldn't use those labels.
Right.
But
Even so, but the biggest issue, or another big issue I have is he is just. They say he's just,
mhm.
right? But he's all loving. You
Well, he
can't
does,
be
but he
both.
can't be merciful.
You cannot. Yeah, you can't be merciful and just at the
I
same time.
mean,
You
you can
can't.
be just, and
Yeah,
you
but
can have feelings that you call love, but you not act lovingly and be perfectly just. It just doesn't work.
you have to put all of that
Yeah,
aside to be
but things
just.
like just the fact that people, yeah, exactly. and and you basically have to ignore that part. So anyway, with all these things, with learning, having just a lot of the rational foundation debunked very, very blatantly, that I learned about why Christianity comports to reality. Between those two things, it's kind of like, these other explanations actually do kind of make more sense. Not that not that they're any more sufficient, it's just that there's less cognitive dissonance that was required. And as I started realizing that, I started kind of shaking off the Bible is true. And once
Mhm.
I shook off the Bible is true, that left me with, well, the Bible is obviously not reliable. And so there's that piece. And if the Bible
Right.
isn't reliable, and my experiences obviously don't particularly report or comport to reality all the time, then can I really say that I'm convinced God exists in any real sense? And at that point, I kind of came to the conclusion that no, I really can't. Because to claim that would be it would require me to be cognitively dissonant. And I'm aware of that now. And so I was able to kind of just let some of those things fall off one by one. And then it took me about 2 months to go to be comfortable with the label atheist, because I was taught that atheist meant you hated God, and agnostic was not caring. And there wasn't
Oh,
really
that's
a
apatheist.
label given. It was kind of clumped into agnostic, but it wasn't, yeah, like apatheist wasn't like atheist, where not believing that a God exists wasn't even necessarily acknowledged. Like it was just called secular, but it wasn't given
Yeah.
like a religious label. And so it took me a little while just to kind of say it to myself. Like if I'm not confident a God exists in any actual sense, that means I'm an atheist. And I said it a couple times to myself, and then I said it to my husband, and then I said it to my family a couple weeks ago. Well, I didn't use the label because they haven't got used to the label change, but I said the definition, which is I don't believe.
You,
I'm
you
not
can say
convinced that
I'm
it
an
exists.
unbeliever. You don't even have to use the word
Hey,
atheist.
there we
You
go.
just, I'm an unbeliever. You know, if you stand
Exactly.
in front of a mirror and say atheist 3 times, Christopher Hitchens pops up behind you, right?
I should do that tonight. No.
He doesn't look so good. He's been dead for a while, so.
It'd be funny if it happened, but no. So yeah, and then I started learning. The biggest kind of nail in the coffin for me was just learning about the other explanations for spiritual things, like the fact that our brains play tricks on us when we're in situations that are a little less than ideal. And I was early on. My mom was dealing with a significant health issue, and I was being taken care of by other family members, and there was not really a lot of stability. So I was also 3, so
How's your mom
there are a
now?
lot of reasons, and there's the norms of having childhood friends and all that stuff. My childhood friend was basically my childhood friend experience, except really weird. Um, and so anyway, and having other things like, what are the chances that when we looked in that backpack for that wallet, we just didn't see it the first time because we were freaking out about the wallet being missing?
Right.
Things like this. Things
Which
like,
is often
exactly, what are the chances that that person that went up for healing again for the 10th time really felt better in any real sense?
right.
And piecing some of those things together, seeing that fact that the lack of consistency was kind of the biggest thing for me, is if it's not consistent, then it's at the rate of coincidence. And if it's at the rate of coincidence, especially with some studies that have looked at that, it just can't take it past coincidence. There has to be more than that. So
Are you talking about intercessory prayer?
yes, and
Okay.
intercessory prayer, healing,
Mm.
parlor tricks, prophetic words, which are essentially Barnum statements wrapped up in maybe a couple things
Yep.
that they heard from the last person.
Wrapped up in faith.
Exactly. Anyway.
Which just, faith is pretty freaking useless if you ask me. I mean, religious faith, we'll call it that, because I use the word from time to time. Like, if I got a buddy that's going for a job interview or something, I say, I got faith in your abilities, pal, you'll get it.
I
But
just
I
lots
have
of confidence.
even though I don't really need faith because I know what he's capable of.
Yeah.
But
I
it's just a
literally
figure of
just bought that for
speech.
confidence because
Yep.
I can't find a reason that, yeah.
But I mean, literally today it's used as a figure of speech anyways. So
yeah,
I still use the word soul, even though I don't believe souls are real. Right? Because there's no evidence for them. So why the hell? You show me some evidence, then I could change my mind. My mind can be changed. I can be convinced if there's evidence there. But I use the word soul as in a musically, right? Because I'm a lyric writer and I'm a musician. So I use the word soul, albeit there are some lines when it sounds like it means what it means. But like if I say in one of my lyrics, I say I gave my heart and my soul, it meant I just gave all of me.
Yeah.
Right. Rather than an actual soul, which ain't fucking real. So anyway.
Yeah, well, I take the Lord's name in vain now for fun because I feel like it's kind of like a way to stick it to the man, as in stick it to my indoctrinated family. But just for self-satisfaction,
Well, how does the family feel about it all now?
Because of how I presented it in a way where I knew that they would probably be decent human beings about it. Because depending on how they take it and what rationality trail they go down, they could respond in different ways. And so
Of
that's kind
course.
of why I phrased it the way I did, which was, I'm not convinced that a God exists. Because in that circumstance, they don't immediately in their brains associate that language with, oh, she's an atheist. It isn't like a trigger word for them. It's more of a, oh, she's on this journey towards seeking truth. And again, that's one of the things where I'm grateful to
Fair.
my parents is the things they emphasized, the things they cherry picked in the religion was
Mhm.
God is truth and God is love. And so if I'm seeking truth, they kind of have this, and this was something I'm really glad was in my psychology was if I'm seeking out what's actually real, what actually comports to reality, then I'm not going to end up in that. There's not going to be anything bad about that in the end.
Okay, fair
And
enough.
so, because that rationale is there, and that's kind of the direction I went with it, they were just kind of like, okay, you'll come around eventually. And as long as I don't have to talk with them about it, I don't care. Like, that I'm not really confident I'm going to convince my parents, and my brother's already thought through. I mean, he's still a Christian, but he's at least made it very nuanced and has given up on a lot of the fake science and a lot of that stuff. So he and I talk about it once in a while. With my parents, I'm just kind of, I care more about how they're going to treat certain people in the country as opposed to
Right.
about what they say they believe and how they rationalize it. And they've already had lots of opportunities to kind of let reason go. And certainly my mom is too attached to her particular understanding of things to want, like, she doesn't have any desire to look at it from what I can
Mhm.
see. And my dad seems to only really care to use it to his benefit anyway. So in that circumstance, I just don't really care to get into it with either of them.
So you kind of
If they
just
ask
leave
me,
that
I will.
topic as you kind of just leave
Yeah.
that topic aside for the most part.
I let them say very dumb things and correct them on very factual things only when it
Okay.
really matters and call it. 'Cause
Yeah, yeah, of
otherwise,
course.
we would just not get along.
Well, there'd be a lot of shouting because
No, there wouldn't. We would just end up not being family anymore. We would just end up cutting
oh,
it off. Yeah, that's
oh,
why I'm like, I'm just
that's so
gonna
good.
not. Yeah, just not gonna.
And that's and honestly, that's another thing I hate about the whole thing, the whole religion thing, is
Mhm.
or just believe so hard in something that it would actually cause you to disown a family member. Like
And it's not
what?
like they would like disown officially. It would just more be drifting
You know
apart,
what?
not talking as
Yeah,
much. We'd end up just not being in
which
any
shouldn't
significant
happen.
relationship. Exactly. The problem being they literally don't know how, 'cause like I didn't. They don't know how to experience the real world and not filter it through an extremely thick lens of indoctrination.
Mhm,
And so
mhm.
everything they say, everything they describe, everything that matters to them, everything they want to know about my life, they want to know it in that lens. And otherwise, they feel like they don't know me, they're disconnected. It doesn't compute outside of
Oh,
that box.
somebody liked your line there.
Nice.
Open. Ah, he's like, ah, I let them say dumb things. He liked that line
Yeah.
there.
Thank you.
and I have to ask you a quick question here.
Yeah.
When you were talking about your parents earlier, why would this person say, "I'm pretty sure her parents despise me now"?
So because he doesn't have to worry, he doesn't care to worry about maintaining that social dynamic with them. He can just
Is that your
basically
husband?
tell them, yeah, that's him.
Oh, okay, now it makes sense.
Yeah, so
'Cause I was like, "Who's this
he
rando in
basically
my
is
chat?"
does the he basically tells them off when he feels like it, and that's
Attaboy, Zach.
fine with me.
Okay, now it makes a little bit more sense because I'm like, This dude in the chat that thinks he knows her parents. What's going on? But now that you say that's your husband, I'm like, huh. Sup, Zach? He's like, if I'd have known, maybe nice to virtually meet you, I suppose. But I hope that means that Zach's gonna join us for the after party, right?
I hope so too. You should bring me an extra beer because we were going to split that one later.
Split a beer?
So we got a couple that are like individual flavors, so that way we can both try a bunch of flavors.
Oh, I gotcha. So you each get half and half, and then you try half and half of the other one. I gotcha.
Because that's my favorite way to taste things, and anything, just getting extra flavors.
Sure. He's like, should I get more beer?
Do you want to? If
you're asking me, no. I have a standard answer for that question. Yes. Always get more beer.
Nice.
I did the second half of the 12-pack that I've got. I saved for today, so I got a half sack. But I might drink 4 of them, and then save the other 2 for tomorrow. Or I might drink them all tonight. I don't know. But I got to work tomorrow, and I got to get up at like 4 a.m. So it's like,
ouch.
Yeah. I was on the stream last night on your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist channel. It was myself and Aaron Raw him and I were hanging out with Ethan, and it was called No Fucks Given. And we talked. Actually, Aaron did most of the talking in the beginning because he was going on. You know how he can just. You mentioned creationists talking about evolution, and he's just like a switch goes, and he's like. And I'm like, take it away, brother. Nice. And then we all kind of got into it. But yeah, it was a lot of fun last night, and I had a few last night. So I showed up at work in the morning the next day. I'm just gonna go in the lab and do my chemistry shit and leave me the fuck alone. So yeah, but
mornings are bad enough without the hangover. But yeah, that too. And
it wasn't so much a hangover. I don't really think I've had a hangover so much for probably 10, 15 years. But it's just because I only got like maybe 4 hours sleep. So it was more of the tiredness. And I still felt like I might have been a little drunk. So,
Fair.
Yeah. But after a couple of 20-ounce cups of coffee, I was zooming off the walls like Ricochet Rabbit in the old cartoons. So I was doing pretty good.
Nice.
I was doing all right. So now that you found your way free, you were clear.
Yeah.
How does it feel?
Clear.
How does it feel for you?
It feels exactly like when I was Christian and happy.
Just without all the baggage.
Basically.
Awesome.
I'm a pretty carefree person on the whole. And so as a Christian, I kind of just used whatever I could to be in a good place and be around people that were decent as far as, at least decent to me, and, learn the things I could learn and enjoy the things I could enjoy. And I'm doing the same thing now. So other than so the biggest difference is more the amount of effort involved in just living. I'm not constantly trying to make sense of the world like I was before. And in that same way, I'm not like living with this sense of there's something I need to be doing constantly. And so since there's nothing I need to be doing, I've been able to just kind of chill a bit more and just like the things I like, do the things I want. And it's been nice. Just a little bit less effort to make that happen.
Yeah, without now having to worry about, if I do that, am I going to burn forever in hell?
Well, that was never concerned. It was just more of because I was the hell thing wasn't really a big part of what was cherry picked or emphasized in any of the places that I'd gone. It was kind of the disliked child of the religion in my house, if that makes sense. It was there and it existed and it was a problem, but it was kind of like it was the one that they just didn't get attention. So because of that, I didn't really have a fear of hell.
That's good. You're quite lucky, because I've spoken to many that came out of it, and that fear lingered with them for years after, right? Which I by the way, I always have links below every single episode, multiple sources for secular type therapies for people who still carry the harmful baggage of religion. So there are people that those folks can talk to.
Yes, and so that's kind of why I said I'm lucky. I'm super lucky, because hell it was talked about, but it was never really made real to me in any sense. Even
It's okay, it's not real.
Experientially. I know, hell's not real.
You're right anyways.
Exactly. So I didn't have to I didn't have to unlearn a sense of reality about hell. And
Very
I'm
good.
also feel extremely fortunate because, again, my husband came out before me, and I know my family enough to not send them down the spiral of being worse than they have to be. I mean,
Right.
it's not great, because they, of course, have this sense of wanting their daughter to come back to the fold. But, and I'm sad that they have that, because that's something that I'm sure is really hard for them. It's not my problem, though. So
You're right. It isn't. It isn't. That's something that they have to learn to live with.
yeah,
Right. So,
or decide that they don't need to live with it anymore, which I'd much prefer. I'd much prefer they don't feel the sense that their daughter's changed somehow or is in danger in some way.
hi, Derek says hi.
That would be much
You're
better.
late, Derek.
I'm not confident in their chances. Hi,
Yeah.
Derek.
We'll have to give him a smack. Bad Derek. No, I'm just kidding, Derek. We all have reasons as to why we show up late to things. I used to have a T-shirt that says, "Yeah, I know I'm late. I'm meant to be." Something like that. I think it's what it said. It was a lot. It was like in the 80s when I had that. The 80s, shit. That's like thousands of years ago. Anyway, so
I know.
I
don't remember the
yeah,
80s.
I do. Oh well, some of them, I guess we'll say, because I was drunk a lot, but as a kid in the bars,
Fair.
try to be all suave and debonair. No, debonair. Excuse me. But you know what I mean, trying to pick up the ladies and stuff at the bar. And but I usually got drinks poured on me for the most part, but that's okay. I knew how to do laundry, so it was okay.
No permanent stains from that.
Nah. Maybe on my ego, but other than that, the laundry was good. But Ellie, we've almost come up to the hour. If you could, yeah, I know, like 2 minutes left. If you could give someone some advice that's on kind of that fence where you might have been at one time, what would you say to them?
I would honestly just say, take your time, figure out what matters to you, and start there. And I'd also encourage you that no matter where you end up, it'll be a place that you can enjoy.
Yeah, that's good advice. Good advice. Well, I want to thank you for joining me today. I've been looking forward to chatting with you for a while. So
thank you.
It was great having you on. And now that I know that Zach, who's been in the chat since pretty much the beginning, is your husband, I'm like, did I say anything inappropriate? So I'm kind of thinking in the back of my head, is he going to yell at me when he gets in the after party?
Just boner. I think that's the only one.
Yeah, we used to say that when I was younger. So you look all suave and debonair, kind of a joke of debonair, right? But laundry routine: put beer in the washing machine. Yeah, now you got it. Wait, I don't launder my beer. Well, you know what? You don't really buy beer; you just rent it, anyways, right? So.
I'm
anyway,
glad not, because then I'd have to return it, and I'd have a lot of trouble with that.
Fair enough. But what I want to do before we close this out, and we are going to get into an after party, folks. If you don't want to be a part of the after party, you just kind of want to hang out in the chat, there is a link to the after party below. I also have Ellie's Twitter link below if you want to follow her on Twitter, because she doesn't really have a lot of followers, but you haven't really been super active on Twitter.
I'm bad at social media. I just don't care enough most of the time. So,
well, I'm sure if you had a few more followers, you might be a little bit more active.
Maybe that's very possible.
But thank you for joining me, Ellie. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you too, Neil. It's been fun too.
And I want to mention a few things before we get out of here. Thank you to all my amazing patrons. Whoops, there we go. Because of you guys, it helps me keep this show going. And little improvements, as you've probably noticed over time, keep happening. And they're going to keep happening. And the show is just going to get better, because I love doing this show, and I'm not stopping anytime soon. However, this coming Thursday, I still don't have a guest scheduled for Thursday, but I might take the day off anyways because my mom's having some mental health issues, and I might just go and stay with her for the evening on this coming Thursday. So there may or may not be a show on Thursday. I have to talk to my mom. I think I'm calling her tomorrow, so I'll figure that out. But again, tomorrow I got to do a taping for the nonprofits. So speaking of which, that's something else that I want to mention. You can come and watch me and some other great hosts on the relaunch to Revamp New Nonprofits, which airs every Sunday at 3 p.m. between A Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience. And I'm one of their regular hosts, and it's a lot of fun. So head over to the channel and give them a subscribe. And don't forget that Randolph and I are coming up with our own call-in show called True North Talk sometime soon. We're still building the studio, so give us a break. But anyways, you can head over to the True North Talk channel and give us a sub over there too. You can also visit our website, www.truenorthtalk.com or .ca, pardon me. And it will have a link to the YouTube channel there as well, plus some other information. And the last Saturday of every month, which is the one coming up, guys, myself and my friend Andy and Seamus from the Free Thought Prophets. Andy's got his own channel, which this show's on, which is called Laughing in Disbelief. We do a little show called Atheist Drinking Out Loud, where we generally make fun of stupid shit that we've seen all week and stupid people and stuff like that. So, is that a Guinness? Nice. All right, so that's it, guys. I want to thank you guys for hanging out with Ellie and myself. I hope you guys had a good time in the chat. And like I always say at the end of these interviews, like the late, great Christopher Hitchens once said, as he pops up in the mirror behind you when you say atheist in it 3 times. I'm kidding. It's called faith because it's not knowledge. And we'll see you guys next time.
What's on